Did you know it's possible to create your own custom API endpoints for a WooCommerce store? So a client of mine approached me recently and asked me to do exactly that. What he wanted to do was for his customers to interrogate the endpoint and get just their orders. Now they could pass in their customer ID to the normal order endpoint, but he wanted to restrict the store so they could only see the orders that they actually create. So what we did was we disabled the entire REST API, built an endpoint, and then only allowed that particular endpoint to list those orders. It looked like that. So I created a new workspace called NM version 1 and then list orders. So what that does is it goes off and gets just the orders for the user that is encrypted in JWT. We'll talk about JWT in another video in depth, but essentially what we can do is we can get a token that encrypts our user ID and then pass that into our code. So don't worry, this user doesn't actually exist on my site anymore. It was just a test user. I've deleted it since. But what we do is we hit this endpoint, it returns this token, and then embedded in that token are my login ID details, my email, my user ID, and that kind of good stuff. So what we can do is we can authenticate using that token and then pass the user ID into the code that's behind this endpoint. Like I say, I'm going to talk about JWT in depth in a future video. So let's look at the back end of the site and see what the code looks like. So the first thing we need to do is create and register a new route. So there he is, NM version 1, and the endpoint is list orders. What that does is it's a get. We're going to get or post or various other methods that are available to us. Then it runs this particular script and then returns that information back to the endpoint. So we'll have a look at the script. We're passing in the request, so that's this point, everything after the endpoint, so it gets all the JWT. And then we decode that JWT token, see who the issuer is, validate the issuer, and if it's correct, if it's sent by my site, then that's okay. And then what we do is we grab the email and user ID out of the JWT token and then pass it to another script. So that's our user ID. And then what the user ID does is, using a consumer key and a consumer secret, it goes to the normal orders endpoint, passes in the customer's user ID and gets their orders. And again, don't worry, I've deleted these consumer key and consumer secrets since, so you're not going to get access to my site. So we create a custom endpoint, grabs the JWT, gets the user ID, passes it into the normal endpoint for customers' orders, and then returns that back. And then that way we can control what is sent back via our custom endpoint. I'll touch briefly on the disabling the REST API. Again, I'm going to do this in a more detailed video next up. So under settings, we've got this disable REST API plugin. You can do it via a plugin or you can do it via code. I've just done it via a plugin for quickness sake here. And what we have, that user is a customer. So this is our customer's REST API rules. So everything's disabled except simple JWT to grab that JWT token and the new endpoints we created. So all that person can do is access these list orders endpoints. So that's how I create a custom endpoint for my clients and then return just the data that they need. So if you need help building an endpoint, please get in touch, neilmatthews.com. If you've got any questions, also get in touch.